Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Lucifer device. It could have been named anything, but they named it Lucifer, large binocular telescope, near-infrared utility with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research, ER. And what's fascinating to me when you guys found this out is we were able to corroborate a secret meeting there on Mount Graham where the Pope, never announced, went to that area to have a meeting, okay? That was interesting. Tim and, good night, the film team are in Rome, and that little tidbit is thrown out there. And obviously you had confirmation when you were sitting at the restaurant, did you not? So here's the thing. If it's a Stargate, now here's something that I want people to understand that's really, really critical at this point, that we just had the Pope return from Antarctica. We had the entity in the White House, and we had Kirill, the Russian Orthodox Church head, all in Antarctica, Patagonia. And what's fascinating, Tom, is in the special operations community, I was informed by somebody who's really well connected, that they're literally watching anomalous openings and gates powering up, okay? That's what Greg Evenson said on this show. And his source was multi-star or a single star. When you're dealing with generals, his sources, I would tell you this, are impeccable. As a matter of fact, after we broke that news, with Greg Evenson broke it on Hagman and Hagman, the two of the mouthpieces that are telling Greg what's going on really wanted people to understand that this is no BS. They actually used a different word, and that the quote-unquote, the gates are opening. So when you first told people on this radio show that Hagman and Hagman about Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, and it came on the television series, I think it's on Netflix, you blew my mind away. I had never read that, but what the aliens portrayed, the way they were portrayed, fits the description of the Vatican astronomers and also a multi-star general who drew it out. Very talented. I mean, amazing artist. What's the chance of those three things happening? So the Pope has a secret meeting. You're dealing with the Stargates. The Native Americans know it's a Stargate. They name their telescope a binocular telescope, and isn't it fascinating? It's a bino telescope. I am absolutely blown away by what corollary confirmation, there you go, by the Spirit of the living God is doing. Now, people, this is real stuff. This isn't Tom and Steve just having passed some mushrooms. By the way, I'm in Montana right now, and Tom is in Missouri. So, you've got to understand this. This is such this is such a God in His love for His creation, opening up all this stuff. And Tom, I was blown away at what your unfettered access there. Do you want to go into what that guy told you in the restaurant?
Yeah, well, it wasn't a restaurant. Yeah. What had happened was we met with a guide. You cannot go up to the top of Mount Graham, by the way, if somebody's listening to this show and if they're thinking, well, I'm just going to go check it out for myself. You won't get anything but arrested and thrown in jail. You cannot go to the top of Mount Graham unless you work this out through Arizona State University like we did. And you have to be taken up there by a guide that works for the observatory. That's the only way you get up there. You go up, 2/3 of the way up the mountain, you run into these giant fences. They're really high. You can't climb over them. They got barbed or razor wire around the top of them. 2 or 3 signs in all kinds of languages, Spanish, Chinese, whatever, American, talking about all the horrible things they're going to do to you if you go over the top of that case. You can't get up there unless you're invited. Well, what happens is the road is really windy, a lot of switchbacks, and I had taken some stuff to help me with that at the base of the hill. Joe Artis didn't, and Chris Putnam didn't, and halfway up the hill they were sure wishing they would have. But about 2/3 of the way up the mountain, there's a campground that was built during Roosevelt's New Deal, when they were creating jobs, basically, for people that were survivors of the Great Depression. And so he said, we're going to stop here, we're going to have lunch, and then from here we'll go on up the mountain. So we go inside there, and there's a guy, he's the caretaker, of the lodge, if you will, and he's got a fire going, and he's sitting there mixing some wood up in the fire, and it's all crackling. So we get our sandwiches, and I go over and I sit down by him, and he starts asking me what we're doing. And I was not trying to give him very much information. Well, you know, we're going up to Mount Graham. We're going up to the top of the mountain to the observatory up there and blah, blah, blah. And Chris is sitting there next to me and Joe. And all of a sudden, the guy that's stirring the fire, you know, you can tell he's been around a long time, one of those old dudes that has seen a lot, right? And he looks at me and he says, he said, why are you going up there? And so we give him a little bit of information. We're not trying to tell him what we're doing. And he said, it wouldn't have nothing to do with the Pope's visit, would it? And we're looking at him like, what in the world are you talking about, right? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, the Pope. He said he come down there in a helicopter the other day and had this visit. And so he's just telling us. So what was funny is we didn't even include that information in the book. And we didn't talk about it publicly, and therefore that was another one of those things where when Timothy Alberino is at the Vatican, and he got, I don't know how much I can say about this, he got behind the door.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want about it because it's in the new, documentary, and we're not.
Well, some of it is.
I
mean, what he was able, he got connected to the right people, and what Timothy was able to do. I mean, he got into the Jesuit headquarters. Now that there again. This is not just, you don't just drive to Rome and say, I want to visit with the Jesuit, leadership. But he got inside, and so what was ironic was in there he learned about the Pope's visit to Mount Graham. Well, Timothy didn't know what this guy on the mountain had told us, and Joe and Chris do and can verify the story that I'm telling you. So there again, that was like out of the mouth of two witnesses, right? There was a verification. What in the world is the Pope doing flying to the top of Mount Graham, right, to visit with them there about whatever's going on? Well, then Timothy's, authorities that are able to get him past the guards into the Jesuit headquarters at the Vatican, he asked them, he says, really? And he's listening to some of the stuff they're saying, and he says, have you ever read the book by Chris Putnam and Tom Horn, Exo Vaticana? Well, they said they had never even heard of it. But they're telling him everything that we had confirmed and the fact that they are monitoring something from the top of Mount Graham that is approaching the Earth using the Lucifer device, everything the Jesuit on duty there that day had told us. But then maybe I shouldn't say anything about the Stargate, what the guy takes. Yeah, I won't say anything about it. See, people need to get the new documentary. I'm not even sure if it's in the documentary where they went from there, because some of that stuff is really highly guarded, and Timothy was telling me that, there's parts of that he can't talk about. But bottom line is, Steve, it all verifies exactly what you're saying. This Stargate technology is something very real. When we went to Mount Graham, one of the questions that I asked the Jesuit who was on duty that day, and Guy Consolmagno, who we had hoped to meet there that day, was not there. So I contacted him from Rome, and the head of the Vatican Observatory Research Group, who is on tour right now, going around the world with his new book, and his seminar is titled "Would You Baptize an Alien?" So they keep talking about this stuff. He gave me 5 interviews via the internet from Rome. So we were able to get to really the authoritative voices on all this. But it all goes back to our old friend Malachi Martin. When Malachi was asked in 2009 by Coast to Coast AM, Art Bell, and he said, Father, why did the Vatican force themselves onto the top of a mountain in southeastern Arizona to build an observatory, and what are they doing up there? And people can go and YouTube this and listen to Malachi's answer. He said it's because they know at the highest levels of Vatican governance and jurisprudence what is approaching the earth, and that it will be of the utmost importance in coming years. And Malachi, that ignited a firestorm, but he suggested that it would be within a decade or so when he thought whatever this was that is approaching the earth would become very, very important. And about 10 years to the date, after that, what happened? 2009, the Vatican, so this is 2 years before we write the book Petrus Romanus. The Vatican convenes a study week on astrobiology at the Pope's summer residence in Gandolfo, Italy. So they invite all these people to come to, to Italy, to Rome, and it's something like, I forget how many, by the way, 40 or 50, whatever it is, top astronomers, geologists, theologians. But what are they doing? They come together to study one thing, and that is, what will the impact on the Earth's religions be given the disclosure or the discovery of advanced extraterrestrial intelligence? Almost 10 years to the day, right when Malachi said this is going to start becoming important. 90 days after that, the Royal Society, so now we're talking about the oldest scientific body in the world, they come together to celebrate their 350-year anniversary. And of all things that they could pick, what do they pick? People can Google this and read it. They pick a subject matter called alien detection and the implications for society. And people from around the world, again, experts from around the world, including representatives, astronomers from the Vatican, go and they have these closed-door meetings in which Lord Martin Rees, who was the Queen's astronomer at that time and the head of the Royal Society, he said aliens are staring us right in the face in ways that the world is not even aware of. And they talked about extraordinary evidence of this and that. And so, by the way, at the time, because we couldn't get behind those closed doors, I assembled my own gathering of 20 of the world's leading experts to talk about what do you think it is they're talking about behind closed doors. And when we release our book next week, that's only one. All 20 hours of those interviews is only one of the literally hundreds of things that we're giving away with this final book, because this is the final one, the final case, the last thing we have to say on the subject matter. But and we're doing this, I would want the public to also know this. If you're watching this current special investigative report at Skywatch TV, if you're watching it on TV or on the Roku channels or on YouTube, the reason the first 2 weeks of that 5-week report was with Steve Quayle is because his brand new documentary has everything in the world to do with how this all began at Mount Graham, but the much bigger revelations that Timothy Alberino uncovered in Rome, and I'm just going to say this cryptically, the Stargate that he was shown there. I hope I'm not saying I'm not, something I'm not supposed to say here.
Listen, you've got freedom to say whatever you want, because, again, ladies and gentlemen, I tell Tom, I said, one of these days when God just gives us supernatural strength and ability, this will be a 3-hour introduction to the end times in a manner and a way that you've probably never considered it. I'll tell you this, that we're talking about, Tom, a moral superior. They're talking about the Vatican's statements, a moral superior alien, if you will, right, civilization. Well, trust me, if they're morally superior, they're not showing up on Earth to molest women, take their eggs, and in all the various sexual positions, pun intended, the aliens get themselves into. I would question the moral superiority. It sounds to me like a return, and I know, and we all know what's really going on here. What they're doing is presenting another gospel. They're presenting their alien, if you will, their plot, their plan, their scheme in order to seduce mankind away from God's word, from his redemption, and from Jesus.